stand with my federal, state, and city law enforcement partners to announce the dismantling of traffickers who flooded the Bronx with fentanyl and heroin from Mexico. This case spans dealers from the South Bronx to significant suppliers in Mexico linked to the Sinaloa cartel. In this investigation, we were able to go beyond the dealer selling glassines in the McKinley houses, beyond his supplier, beyond the major distributor, all the way to the Mexican national we tracked around the U.S., allegedly making deals and arranging deliveries. The 2 indictments we announced today charge dealers whose poison kills on average 20 Bronxites a month. As with any fentanyl dealing investigation, we will investigate whether there are connections between several fentanyl overdose deaths in the Bronx and with this case. Fortunately, 23 kilos, that's 50.6 pounds of fentanyl destined for the Bronx and the Northeast were intercepted before it could wreak havoc in our communities. The stamp on many of the fentanyl-laced heroin packs that sold in the Bronx, Albany, and other Northeast cities says it all. It was stamped paid. But with our law enforcement partners, we will pursue individuals at every level of illegal narcotics trade who put money above human life. With me today are Special Agent in charge of the Drug Enforcement Administration New York office, Ray Donovan, and I want to welcome Ray back to his Bronx roots. Assistant Special Agent in charge of Homeland Security Investigations of New York, Sean Paulinet. Eric Triana, DEA Special Agent in charge. Brian Weiner, DEA Group Supervisor. Lieutenant Mark Zakaris, New York State Police. And from my office, Assistant District Attorneys Edwin Scolari, Joseph Keok, Katura Ladd, Christina Paquette, Jennifer Shaw, Diego Hernandez, Chief of our Special Investigations Bureau, and from my executive staff, Tarek Rahman, Deputy Chief of Investigations. 22 people have been indicted on charges related to trafficking heroin and fentanyl from Mexico to the Bronx. 3 of the defendants are charged with operating as major traffickers, which carries a maximum of life in prison if convicted. 17 of the 22 individuals have been arrested, most of them during a takedown that happened on May 28, 2019, that yielded drugs, a Mossberg .22 caliber semi-automatic rifle, an assault-style rifle, and at 189 rounds of ammunition. The defendants are charged in 2 indictments. 1 indictment charges 11 men with 236 counts of various degrees of criminal sale and criminal possession of a controlled substance and conspiracy. And the 2nd indictment also charges another 11 men with 281 counts of various degrees of criminal sale and possession of a controlled substance, as well as conspiracy. According to our 20-month investigation by the Bronx District Attorney's Office, NYPD's Criminal Enterprise Investigation Section, the Drug Enforcement Administration Task Force, and the Homeland Security's investigations, we dubbed this investigation Operation Getting Paid. The defendants were part of 2 different groups that trafficked several kilograms of fentanyl and heroin monthly and sold it in bulk to distributors in the Bronx, Philadelphia, Albany, and other cities. The drugs wound up on the streets in $10 packets. According to the investigation, Roberto Gonzalez Franco is a Mexican national with a B-1 visa border crossing card, restricting his travel to 75 miles from the border. Gonzalez Franco crossed the border approximately 15 times from September 2018 to early February 2019. He held meetings with defendants in the Bronx, Chicago, and Philadelphia. The investigation began with the probe of drug dealing in the McKinley houses here in the Bronx, where Charlie Rodriguez allegedly headed a group that sold glassines of heroin with the stamp paid and glassines with heroin and fentanyl mix stamped priceless. According to the investigation, on January 6, 2019, Kelvin De Leon, who was a leader of one of the groups in the Bronx, died of acute heroin intoxication in his home, where it is believed he stored narcotics. And according to the investigation, two defendants, Carlos Vasquez and Felipe Marquez, frequented drug treatment programs and may have used them to cultivate vulnerable people as heroin customers or resellers. We will never stop trying to stop the flow of these drugs and to end the opioid epidemic that has stolen hope from so many people here in the Bronx. I would like to take a moment to commend the NYPD detectives and police officers who worked tirelessly on this case for 20 months. These are the troops on the ground performing often dangerous work to make our streets safer. I commend them for their dedication and their courage. At this time now, I will give you Special Agent in Charge, Ray Donovan.
Thank you, DA Clark, as well as other law enforcement members that are here, to include the New York OSTEF Strike Force members that participated in this investigation. This case is a bird's eye view of how the Sinaloa cartel supplies local distribution networks that are fueling the opioid addiction crisis. The Sinaloa cartel is one of the largest, most powerful cartels in the world. It controls the vast majority of the distribution illicit drug markets throughout the United States. It's expanding its capacity to produce fentanyl and traffic it into our country, as well as in the last 6 months alone, DEA has taken down, along with its Mexican partners, 10 full production conversion fentanyl labs capable of producing thousands of kilograms of fentanyl destined for New York City. This case, stemming from Culiacan, Mexico, into Southern California, on its way to Chicago, and ended up in the streets in the Bronx, is indicative to the scope, the power, and the reach of the Sinaloa cartel to establish distribution networks in our communities and our neighborhoods here throughout the city. I commend the agents, the investigators, the detectives, the prosecutors, who dedicated 1.5 years of their lives focused on dismantling this criminal network in order to save lives. Whether it's in the mountains of Sinaloa or it's in the streets along McKinley houses, 23 kilograms of fentanyl is a significant seizure. It's enough to kill thousands and thousands of people throughout the tri-state area. Today's fentanyl is being mixed with heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, as well as marijuana. Today's fentanyl is deadly, and it is real. Law enforcement partners here are committed to pursuing these criminal networks that put greed over human lives. Once again, thank you to the Bronx District Attorney's Office for collaborating with this investigation.
Thank you. Now we'll take questions on the subject.
Can you speak a little bit more about what happened at the McKinley houses? What were they actually doing there? Selling there?
Selling, yes, selling heroin.
And how did that come to your attention, the McKinley houses?
Well, through investigations and information we received, I'm not at liberty to say exactly everything, but our attention was drawn there because, you know, there's a problem with heroin sales in the Bronx, in the South Bronx, and in public housing. So our attention was drawn there, and we began this investigation, and here we are now 20 months later, where we're able to track the actual source of how that heroin was getting to the Bronx.
Were you having an inordinate number of overdoses at the McKinley houses?
I'd have to get back to you on that. I'm not exactly sure how many, but I know that in the data that we've received, unfortunately, the Bronx has had the most overdoses in the city.
Were any of the 22 convicted of
I can't hear you.
Were any of the 22 convicted for murder previously?
No.
And was there any connection with any sellers in the Bedford Park area?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. The investigation continues.
Expand a little bit more on the visiting of the drug rehabilitation centers to try and, I guess.
Well, I don't want to, some of the sales were happening in close proximity to these rehabilitation centers. And I believe one of the defendants may have had an affiliation with it. But I'm not at liberty to go into detail of what the investigation entailed.
Could you give us a little thumbnail sketch, just how it was transported? It was brought in from Mexico at the border, and then these two men stayed at the border, or they actually traveled in the U.S.?
You want to talk? Yeah.
Just kind of-
Sure. So Sinaloa cartel uses a whole host of methodologies to smuggle narcotics into the country. This particular organization was coming in by way of San Diego up to Los Angeles and then eastbound to Chicago. But that's just one tentacle of the overall cartel. I mean, they literally have hubs all throughout the United States. New York City is the biggest hub for the Northeast.
They also used vehicles that had traps inside. So that's how some of it was also transported. Any other questions?
How big of a hit is this for the cartel?
I can't hear you.
How big of a hit is this for?
So this particular network, if you will, affected multiple investigations throughout the U.S. So it is a loss for them, no doubt about it.
Any other questions?
Was Mr. Franco flagged? It says he has a visa to travel within 75 miles of the border. How was he flagged? Though he had a visa to travel back and forth?
So through HSI's information and access to databases on international travel, we're able to determine somebody's immigration status, their visa status, and their ability, what any limitations are on a visa. So through that information, we're able to basically identify what the limitations are on anybody's ability to be in the U.S. or to travel throughout the U.S. or things of that nature.
And those not arrested yet, are they in the U.S.? Do you know where they are? Or how is it?
They're being sought. We're looking for them. The investigation continues.
Is NYCHA a part of the investigation? Because you mentioned there's a lot happening at NYCHA.
We did have assistance from NYCHA, New York City Housing Authority.
Will any of these folks be turned over to ICE?
Excuse
Will any
me?
of these folks be turned over to ICE?
I'm not sure of that. Would you know?
Well, it depends not on us, not on Homeland, but it depends on the cooperation with the local prosecution if they are turned over or not turned over. But we don't decide that.
Any other questions? No? All right, thank you very much.